afternoon, guys. So today we will continue with where we left last time, IAM. So that is, IAM is a very critical component of critical service in the AWS. So let's deep dive into that and try to understand the basic principles without any confusions. So ask any question that you have so far um, before we get into it. Okay, anything. Uh, um, and before that, have all of you tried connecting to AWS and have you explored what are the services available? Could you please give a thumbs up if you have tried? And please come online in video. That will be better. Okay, Pandi, I see thumbs up. Venkat. Metaphor folks, you already have access to AWS, so that's fine. Other than Metaphor strategy folks, have you tried logging into AWS? And if not, do you have any challenges logging into it or creating an account? We can discuss that.
Prem, can you explain one time
Sorry, come again.
how to log in AWS, right? So can you explain one more time?
Yeah, that is very straightforward. Like I will show that, but it is very similar to how you log into any application new. Okay, let's show that. Anybody else have any other complications logging in?
Prem, so are we able to log in without the credit card, debit card?
You don't have to worry, actually. That will not be you will not incur any cost unless you use any service.
The problem is we are not aware of anything. So if we did anything, we don't know what could be there yet. So that's why I'm just asking.
No, see that that is I can do one thing. I can create one user in my account and give you access. Okay,
Okay.
that is possible. I can do that. Okay, I can create ID, but you should be careful that you are not running anything.
That's why I just wanted to
Even if you
see.
run anything, yeah, I will be able to access, see that and put a restriction. That is not a problem.
Yeah, unless
Okay,
until if so little bit more about that,
okay,
we just wanted to be careful. That's why.
no problem.
Yeah.
Anybody who wants access like that, just ping me your email IDs. I will add you as a user. Okay, and we can go from there. Okay, but anyway, so Ravi, but you should have access to your, through your Metaphor ID, I believe. If not, I will check. We can
I'm
do
not
that.
tried with that, Prem. Yet to check.
Okay, you should be having. Okay, let me share my screen. I will quickly show that. Okay, AWS. Just type AWS console. Okay, we'll start from here. Okay, it detects that I'm already logged in. So let me go to a incognito window. So create AWS account. That will take you to sign up. So here you can give your email ID. You can specify some account name, my personal account or anything. Anything you can give and press verify email address. After that, it is going to send you an email. It's going to ask you for a credit card, and then you will enter that and you will log in. You will land on that page. Okay, without giving an email ID, I'll not be able to show you next step. So we have seen user, we have seen group, we have seen what is a role, we have seen what is a policy. So to reiterate again, policy is the lowest level. I mean, policy is the set of permissions. A permission is nothing but whether it is going to allow you to do something or deny you to do something. So that is the It can be at a minute level of, in this particular service, based on this condition, allow this person or allow this role, whatever. So it is just going to say allow or deny to do something on something. Okay, so that is a policy. You can have a set of permissions and create it as a policy, and that policy can be assigned to a role or a user or a group. So you can assign a policy directly to a role, and then you can assign the role to something or somebody, or you can assign a policy to a user directly. You can assign a policy to a group directly. So when you assign a policy to a group directly, any user who is connected to that group assumes that they automatically get that permission or policy. So users, when you are actually going to assign a policy to a role can be assigned to a user or a specific service. For example, you have, let's say, a lambda function. A lambda function is nothing but a function that is going to run. Say it needs to connect to S3 bucket. S3 bucket is where files are stored. Without having a proper permission, lambda function cannot access the S3 bucket to retrieve the files from there. Okay, so what we will do is we will create a role. That role will have a policy. That policy will say anybody who is going to have this policy assigned, they can access S3 bucket to read. Okay, so you create a policy, you assign a policy to a role that allows access to the S3 bucket, and you assign this role to a lambda function, so that that lambda function can access S3 bucket. We will show that as a demo, but this is what it is. A user also can assume roles. It is not like assigning roles. You will not see assigning a role to a user, but what you can do is you can assume roles. Okay, when I say assume roles, there can be multiple roles. Let's say you are creating a developer role, you are creating a lead role, you are creating a manager role. Okay, so and or you are creating a auditor role. Okay, auditor role, let's say you want to assign it to somebody who is going to audit this account. Okay, but they are not part of our account, right? They will have to have read only access to all the services, so that they can see the logs, they can see what's going on, but they will not have any other access, and we cannot provide this access to anybody permanently, right? So we can say, between this time to 2 to 4, this person will audit our account, and we will provide a role, we will provide permission for that person. So in that case, what you can do is you can create a role called auditor role, and assign the permissions of whatever you want to. And that user can be a AWS user coming from another account, or he can be a federated user. Federated user means you can even use your Google ID to log into AWS as a federated user. If you are allowing that, if your account is going to allow that, then that federated user can assume this role, and this role will be applicable only for a certain time. So whenever you are assuming a role, it's like it will provide that access only for a particular time. So default is 1 hour. You can make it up to 12 hours or so, right? So when we want an auditor to log into our account and see, so we will assume this role to that auditor's user ID, so that they will have that access automatically. In 1 hour, that will be removed, or once you manually remove that role, that user loses access to that. And you can think about this way, another way. You have a same user ID. First it has to perform a role of collecting information from S3 bucket. Second, it has to go and execute some lambda functions. Third, it has to go and update another database with the data that you have. So in these three cases, three different actions are going to happen three different times. Okay, you can use the same role, and you can say, okay, I will give you a role that will allow you only to read S3 bucket. assign that role to this user, make the actions that is needed on the S3 bucket, and then complete the work. Then use the same user, remove this role of S3 bucket access and assign the role of Lambda function access. So this user now will be able to do only Lambda function. He can do whatever that can be done in Lambda function. He will not have access to S3 bucket at this time because you have removed that role, and he can perform that. Then you are using the same user to perform another action on another service. So three different services, three different times you are using three different roles. All three roles you are assigning to this user one by one. So the same user is like, he is wearing a hat of a S3 user, he is wearing a hat of a Lambda user, he is wearing a hat of a DynamoDB user or something, right? So this way you can have one single user access many roles. You can assign the time for that and juggle between the roles. This is very useful when you don't want to give 100% permission to anybody all time. Okay, so if you are a developer, you will probably get access to everything that you want to do full time, I mean as a permanent access. But there are situations where you don't want to give that. You want to give only specific role for that person for a specific period of time, right? So let's say we want one of the developers to extract a report from files available in the S3 bucket, but that is very sensitive information, so we don't want to give access to that developer as a permanent access. So at that time I can create a role that will provide access for a specific period of time, assign that, get the work done, and remove that role. So the user will, you will not change anything, you will just assign a role and remove a role. That way you are not modifying the user permanently, and you can manage your work accordingly. So any questions on this concept of what is a role, what is a policy, what is a group, what is a user? It's very important.
Prem, Pandey here.
Yes.
That assume rule you said, no? Assume rule.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
could you please just give any one example? Assume rule and what is the permanent rule? I'm a little getting confused over here. What is that?
There is no, yeah, there is
Uh,
no, there is nothing called permanent here. Okay, what I'm saying is you can create a role you can create a role and assign it to anything or anybody.
uh,
Okay, so
right.
when you say assign, let's say you have a EC2 instance that is running. Okay, this EC2 instance always it needs to have access to your RDS database,
Oh, yes.
because every request that you are going to update your database. So when as long as your EC2 instance is running, it always needs access to your RDS instance.
RDS.
Okay, so this is for that resource EC2 instance. So you will give a permanent access. What you will do, you will create a role, or you will assign a user to the EC2 instance who will
Okay.
have this policy assigned permanently until you remove that. Okay, so you understand the point, right? So you
I
are
got it.
assigning it to a user or to a role that always has that permission. Okay,
Yes.
this is what is a permanent role. You are just making it permanent. Okay,
Yeah.
and this role can be assumed by anybody, right? So if you are making this role assumed only on a need basis, then it becomes
Assumption.
uh, not a permanent one.
Okay.
It just assumes that role for that specific period of time.
Okay.
Okay, so the same role, if you say, okay, assume this role for this user, what it will do is it will internally set a token for that user. Okay, that,
Mm.
and that token will be effective only for a certain period of time. That token expires, the user loses the permission. So that is what it is.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah. And okay, so now let's see about a user. A user can have access in multiple ways. Okay, so you can log into the console with your user ID and password. So I can go ahead and create, let's say, going to my account. So I can go ahead and create a user. So here I have created a user. I believe I showed that last week. Here I have created a user for whom I have created a password. We changed the password last week, if you remember. Okay, so I gave a user ID and a password, and that user could log into this console, but he will not see anything because this is the only policy he has. This one I have added recently. Let me remove that. Uh, so this is the least privilege policy. I have not assigned anything to this user. So he has logged in through this console, AWS console. So this is one way. Another way is CLI. CLI means command line interface. So what is command line interfaces? If you have your development environment, you have your terminal, right? From the terminal you can have, if you are installing AWS SDK, right? So that gives you an opportunity to connect with your AWS from your terminal. Okay, so you can say, like, I will show from my project, let's say AWS. If I give this command, I can say which user ID I should use, which access key I should use, what is the region, and that is, this user is set for me. So it is called AWS CLI, command line interface. You can it is just, you can install the AWS in your command line, and you will be automatically able to sign in through that, or make any action through the CLI. It is mainly for developers. Okay, and API. So this is programmatic access. So what is programmatic access? You can execute a code from any application, right? Or from any service. Like, you want to run a Python code that will do something. So then in that case, you need to connect, right? So you will be running that program, but you will be using AWS SDK there also, and you will specify the access key and secret key. So that way, you can access this the same. It is the same user, right? The user is the same, but this user is going to get an access key and secret key, through which you can either use it in the CLI, I mean the command line interface, or programmatic access. So we will see what that is. So one is user ID and password. With that, you can log into the console. With the password, you will not be able to do a CLI access or API access. Okay, so if you want to programmatically access for this user, what you need to get is an access key. Okay, so here you can see I have already created one access key, and that is active. Okay, so I can create one more. Any number of access keys you can use. So that will be in the when creating a user itself, it'll ask you whether you want access key or not. First, when I created, I did not create one. So I am now updating this user with a new access key. So it is asking me for the best practices, access key best practices and alternatives. uh, One of the main thing is, AWS suggests don't use access keys and secret keys. For most cases, they have provided you some alternates for that. Okay, why? Because these keys are exposed, right? So these keys are exposed in your code, in your environment variables somewhere. Okay, what they are saying is, don't use that. We have provided alternates for that. So what is your use case? It is asking, okay, if I say I'm going to use it for the command line interface, it will tell me, you can, for command line interface, you don't have to use that. We have alternates like Cloud Shell and AWS CLI version 2 they have introduced, where you don't need to provide access key. You can automatically log in using your user ID and password uh, with the IAM identity center. So that way, you will not use an access key. You can use your password itself. Cloud Shell is another one. You can see the top one, right? You can see this button. So this is called Cloud Shell. This is just like using your terminal in your AWS web page itself. You need to use your program, your computer terminal. You can use a terminal from this itself. So that is what is Cloud Shell. So it says it will prepare a terminal for you, and it is giving you, and you can set your AWS credentials here and start using it. Okay, so we will see about the CLI Cloud Shell later, but this is similar to your command, your terminal. If you are using your terminal, the same thing. Okay, I'll close it. And another option is like local code. If you are going to run through your local code, where you will specify this is my AWS user, access key and secret key. They are saying we have some AWS toolkits enabled that will automatically authenticate through the identity center. You don't need to use it. You don't need to use your access keys in the local environment as well, but we will not go there. And applications running on AWS compute service. So this is another one. As I said, either you are running your EC2 instance, or either you are running your Lambda functions, or anything that you want, any service that needs access to another service that needs to connect. So you can assign a user to your service. So in our application, what we are doing is currently we are actually configuring AWS access key and secret key for each of the EC2 instances and each of the Lambda functions as environment variables, and saying that okay, this user will be used to access this, to perform this operations. So if you see individual users, every user will have, we have like dev user, test user, stage user, and production user. A dev user will have access to EC2 instances and databases and Lambda functions related to development environment. A test user will have related to test environment, and so on. So that is one way. That is the way we are using. It says alternate method is use IAM role instead. Okay, I will show you how to use that IAM role instead. Okay, so it is saying don't use access keys, assign roles instead to those resources. Okay, and next one is third party. So third party is you plan to use this access key to enable third party applications or services that monitors or manages your AWS resources. So it is a third party service which is you know um, accessing from outside your AWS. So there also they have again IAM roles they are insisting instead of here is where I said an auditor is coming to audit. Okay, so an auditor is coming with is a third party service, right? Let's say auditor is a program that is going to look at all the details or logs from your application. So for that user, you can assign a role that will give this access. You don't give the secret key to them, access key and secret key to them, so that they can use it, right? Because role you have the it is time bound, and you can disable anytime that you want without making any changes. And applications running outside AWS similar. So this is third party is a user. This is an application running outside. The same thing, IAM roles. Okay. So let's say for our case, we want to use in our local code. I say, okay, I understand. I will still want to use a access key, right? So I will do that. And it's going to ask me description. I can say secondary uh, access key. Let's say create an access key, and it's going to create an access key. This is my access key, and this is the secret. Okay, secret, you can click on this to show, so that it's going to show. This only one time it will be available. So this is only time that the secret key is viewed or downloaded. So you should actually download the CSV file if you want to access it. If you want to get it again, retrieve it again. Otherwise, you won't see this here. What you can do is you can remove this if you have for some reason forgot it. You have not downloaded. You cannot use this access key. You can create a new access key and use that. Okay. So that is what it's created now. So it has Now I have two access keys, access key 1 and access key 2. I can both will work the same way as long as they are active. I can give one access key to one service, another access key to another service, depending on what I wish. Okay, so that is the access key and the secret key. So if you see, so this is how it is going to be. So this is the first access key I had and the secret key. This ones I will be using as AWS access and secret keys to perform any operation. I'll show you a demo on that. Sorry. So that goes to CLI and API access. API is nothing but calling any function, any service to any service that will go through an API through AWS SDK. Any questions here? These are all vague points, but points to be remembered. Okay, so there are two ways. One is password, one is access key and secret key. Access password can be used only for console. Secret key can be only should be used for CLI and API. And there are alternatives not to use secret key, and that is by using IAM roles, right? Secret key can be viewed only once when you are creating it, and once it is once you forgot it, then there is no way to retrieve. You should terminate the existing one and create a new access key. So these are all the important points that probably you may be asked. Okay, what happens if you lose your secret key? How will you retrieve it? That may be a question. So the only way is to get rid of that and creating a new one. Okay, and can you use your password to log in? Can you use your password in your program to access programmatically? No, right? So yeah. Okay, so as a user we have two type of users. One is a root user and one is a normal user. So the one that we created now is a normal user. A root user is always the person who actually created that account. Root user can be only one user, the person who created the account, and that user has all the privileges. So this user will be able to modify the privileges for other users, right? So this has no privilege unless explicitly given. So when you're creating, if you are not assigning any specific permission for this user, he is not going to have anything similar to what we just created. Okay. In group, as we see, we can assign multiple users to a group, and there can be different groups for examples like database admin, developers, senior developers can be different groups. Okay. In policies, there are three types of policies. Okay, so one is AWS managed policies, customer managed policies, inline policies. So what is AWS managed policies? We have already seen there are a set of policies that AWS created for us that tells if you assign this particular policy, let's say S3 full access, it provides full access, entire full access to that user, that whoever is assigned to that policy. That is AWS managed. So what is the difference and why we have these three different policies? AWS managed means they are managing, so they will update it when needed. Okay, I'll tell you an example. So let's say there is list of operations that you can do in S3 bucket. So today you see 100 different operations. Okay, and full access means it gives all the 100 different operations. Tomorrow they are introducing another feature in S3 bucket. Okay, that will have a entirely different job flow or something. Okay, new permission. You don't need to worry about getting that new permission manually, because they will update it automatically. Any new services added, any new features added to each services, they will automatically update the managed policies. So if it is read only, they will immediately give read only for the new service within that. If it is full access, they will immediately give full access for that this thing. Okay, at the same time, you will not have any control over that. You can only assume, or you can only specify a specific policy. You will not be able to modify anything on that policy. because AWS is managing that policy. So that is the AWS managed. Customer managed means you can create your own policy. Like we have seen, we created a S3 read-only policy, and we can modify that anyway. We can pick and choose permissions within services and create a new policy. Okay, that is customer managed. So what happens there? It will not be, if let's say, even though we wanted to give full access to a user, let's say S3 full access, we are creating a customer managed policy. We are selecting all services, okay, available, and I created this policy. This policy will not be updated even if AWS is updating or adding more permissions, which is actually part of the managed service. If it is part of the managed service, automatically gets updated. But if I have created my own policy, which is exactly similar to AWS managed policy, today I am creating a customer managed policy, which is exactly same as AWS managed policy, right? Tomorrow, if there is a change to the permission, that will get reflected in the AWS managed policy, but will not get reflected in the customer managed policy. So that is the main difference. Okay. The customer managed policies and AWS managed policies, they all appear on the list of policies. You can use it multiple times. You can assign it to anybody, any role. Okay. So we can see that here. Let's say policy. Let's go to policies. Policies. Okay, these are all customer managed policies. Okay, but if that's why it is listing in the policies side. So if you go to a user, let's say add a permission. I'll take this demo user. I will add permission. It will list all the existing ones, attach policies directly. So 1184. So you can see the customer managed as well as AWS managed, right? I can select customer managed, I can select AWS managed. These are all the policies. And you can see it is a JSON and it provides all possible things. So if anything, so in this case, access analyzer service role policy, it gives all the access to the S3. Tomorrow, if there is one more policy comes, automatically it gets updated. You don't have to do anything, you will automatically be having it. If I have just created one customer managed with the same set of policies here, I will not get that. I mean, that particular policy will not be updated. That's the only difference. Okay, but I can assign it to anybody because it is listing out here. There is another policy that you can see is inline policy. Create an inline policy. So what is the difference? Inline policy will not appear in the list of permissions if you want to assign it to someone else. Okay, for example, this user, this is if I create an inline policy that is assigned only to that user. If I remove that, it is gone. I cannot copy this or use it for another user. It is very specific to that user or that role that you are creating. Okay, that is why it is called inline. So I will do this only when I know that this permission is specifically needed only for this user. I am not going to use it as a a recurring one for other users. So I can do one, create one inline. So that let's do one here. So let's say we will assign access to S3 bucket for this user. Okay, so let's do one inline. It says what service you want to give a permission. I will choose S3 bucket, and it is asking. It is similar to creating a custom one, but it is going to be inline. Allowed actions, I'll say all S3 actions. Allowed resources, all resources. Resources means in S3 bucket, do you want to make it specific to a particular bucket, or anything? You want to make it particular access grant location or access point or bucket or object, any minute level you can go. But let's say I give all S3 access, if all bucket, all actions is allowed, and I create that. I'll give a policy, let's say inline S3 access. Create a policy. That's created. So now inline S3 access is available for this user. So it allows S3 bucket access for this user. And you can, if you go to another user, local user, let's take this. And if I want to assign that inline policy here, I will not find that in the add permission. If I go to, attach permission, even in the copy permission, I don't know, I will not be able to copy from that. I can copy from a user, but I cannot take the inline policy. That inline policy will not appear here. That is why it is called inline. So I'm stressing that again and again, because that is the only difference, and that is what that is why they have inline. When will you do inline? You definitely know that this is only for this particular user, and no user will be, again, you will not have a need to you assign that to anybody else. If you have a need to assign to a set of policies to a set of people, go with AWS managed or customer managed policy, so that you can reuse that anytime. Okay. Okay, let's come back. So designed for many common use cases. This is designed for, this is also many common uses, but it is, you are managing it. Useful to maintain strict one-to-one mapping between policy and the identity. The identity here is the user or a role. Okay. Now, so it's an example of what is a managed policy. So this is these are the examples of some managed policies. You can and another important point here, right, between the AWS managed and customer managed policy. AWS managed policy can be assigned across accounts. Okay, across accounts means you can have multiple accounts in your organization. So you can assign a managed policy across accounts, because it is all common to all accounts. Customer managed policy you will be creating in your one specific, even though you have 10 accounts under your root organization, the one that you are going to create is going to be specific to that particular account. You cannot assign it to other accounts. Okay, that will not appear on other accounts. That's the only difference. So here you can see this is one policy administrator access. So these are all AWS managed policies. You can assign to a user in account 2, you can assign to a user in account 1, or admin. You can assign to a role. The different combinations you can do, right? Multiple accounts. At the same time, you see this is customer managed, that is specific to one account. Example, AWS account, and this is what you have created as policies. You can assign to a group, so you can assign to a list of users, you can assign to roles, but only on that account. Inline policy, whatever you are creating and assigning, only to that particular specific group. If you are assigning to a group, only that group. If you are assigning to another group, only that group. If you are assigning to a role, only that role. If you are assigning to a user, only that user. Okay, so that's the difference here. Hope you are clear with these three, AWS managed, customer managed, and inline policies. Okay. So there are different policy types we have. Okay, so this is a broader concept, but I will introduce you to all these things. We will see some of these in detail later, but these are the broader things that we need to understand. Okay, identity based. So when we say a policy can be identity based. Identity means user is an identity, a role is an identity. So when a policy is identity based, it is attached to a user, a role, or a group. Okay, it can be managed or inline. So it says this user can do this. Okay. So when a policy is assigned to an identity, it says this user can do this. What can this user do? This user can access S3 bucket. This user can access Lambda function. That is identity based. Resource based is same policy that is attached to a resource. Okay. So when we attach a policy to a resource, then that says, okay, what can be done in this resource? Can you only do read only in this? Okay, usually deny permissions will be attached on resources to specify, even though a person who is accessing an S3 bucket can read, write and all, but if you are assigning a deny permission saying nobody can write into this bucket, then it will stop. So that is a resource base. Even though the identity has the permission, the resource doesn't allow that, then that's the identity cannot do anything. So there are policies that you can assign to resources. Okay, we should not get confused with assigning a role to a particular service. When you are assigning a role to a particular service, that service is also an identity. For example, lambda function accessing S3 bucket. Lambda is an identity. S3 is the resource. Okay. So Pandi accessing EC2 instance, Pandi is identity, EC2 instance is the resource. EC2 instance accessing database, RDS database, EC2 is the identity, RDS is the resource. So you can assign policies to either identity based or resource based. Okay. And there is something called policy boundary. Boundary is something that you can set even though the identity allows. Okay, you can restrict it with a boundary. For example, mm, let's say um, on an overall account level, all developers have access to do um, anything on the S3 bucket. Okay, so that is one that is the policy assigned to the identity. All S3 access, S3 full access is given to the identity, no restriction. Okay, as a developer, I can go and do anything on any S3 bucket if I have that identity based access. Policy boundary is you will create another policy, okay, and say this policy allows write or read only with the only on the resources that has a tag name. The tag is equal to the tag says environment equal to development. So you can assign a tag to any resource. Okay, to any resource you can assign a tag and say environment is equal to development, test, or anything. Okay, so let's say you are assigning the tag, and this policy says this is allowed only on tag environment is equal to development. And if I attach that boundary to this user, right? So I given S3 full access from the managed policy. Okay, but I am also attaching a boundary. That boundary says you can do anything only on the tag development. Okay, so then even though I have full access, I will not be able to do anything on the buckets that don't have the tag environment equal to development. That is the boundary. So you are drawing a boundary. So you can assign this boundary to any user. So even though the account admin has provided full access, you are restricting it based on the boundary. Okay, so that is policy boundary. Uh, and service control policy. So service control policy is at an organization level. As I said, there can be multiple accounts within an organization. So the service control policy, limits says okay, in this account, any user can do only this. Okay, so it is assigned at a very high level before the account level. It says even though within the account all these operations are possible, even though let's say you give administrative access to that to a user in an account. Okay, but there is somebody beyond that account organization. Okay, that organization can say, hey, this account nobody can do any update operations. Okay, all are read only. Even though within that account you have any permission, you cannot do anything unless I provide, as an organization, provide you the access. So you can put a service control policy restriction at the organization level for each accounts. There can be 4 accounts. Organization can say account A, okay, they are governed by service control policy that allows read-only access. Account B, they are governed by service control policy that allows read and write access. Account D, so C, they can do read, write, delete. Okay. Account D, they can have only specific services enabled, or they can only see logs. Okay, so this is how you can manage your accounts through service control policies. Okay, and next one is access control list. So this is actually a cross account permission. So from account A to account B, can somebody access anything? Yes, we can allow that. So that is provisioned by this access control policies. Okay. Session policy is like this, an advanced thing, but there is something like this. You can understand policies that you pass a parameter when a session is created for a user or role. It's like a token, right? So it is only available, accessible only in that session. You can create a session, that session will be active, and terminate the session. It's over. So like assuming a role with a particular session. So these are all the different policy types: identity based, resource based, policy boundaries applied on top of identities, thing, service control, that is at the beyond the account level, access control, that is between accounts, session policy is specific to a particular session. You can create a token and do. Okay. Any questions? Okay. So this is a example of how policy boundary works. So let's say identity based provides these five things, and policy boundary permission only gives three. Then effectively you can have only three. Okay, but that is not true with resource based. Resource based is like inclusive. So if identity based provide this four, resource based provide this four, and permission is this. So permission plus resource is available for that. Okay, so if a resource allows something but the permission boundary does not allow, then that will not stop the user. Okay, so permission boundaries are restricting only identity based policies, not resource based policy. That is what the meaning of this. And organization SCPs also, I mean, again, the permission boundary will restrict. Session policy also, permission boundary will restrict. So everything has to be true for that. Only for resource based it is not true. Okay, understood. So this is an example of identity based policy and resource based policy. So identity based says, okay, John Smith can read list on resource X. Okay, a resource based policy at the same time, if you see, John can read me, Mary can read me. Okay, on the resource X. Resource X can be anything like an S3 bucket, a specific bucket that says only John Smith and Mary Major can read, others cannot. Okay, and John Smith, for him, he has permission that okay, he can read on resource X, this particular state. So these two put together, John Smith will have access to resource X. Will John Smith have access to resource Y? He will not have, because he has no identity also. Resource Y is also not allowing John Smith. But at the same time, resource Y is allowing Carol. Okay. So he says Carol has Y and Z. So resource Y is allowing Carol to read and write. But resource Z is deny Carol Salazar. Okay, which means that even though Carol has list and read access on Y and Z, she can do only on Y because Y allows Carol, but Z denies Carol. Okay, so that is how it is controlled. Even though you have identity based, the resource doesn't allow, so you cannot do. So these are some examples of different combinations.
So,
Zhang has yeah,
yeah, Prem. So it is based on hierarchy, that
correct.
access, correct? No. So would be okay.
Not like hierarchy. Okay,
Mm,
so it is like uh, I have access to enter that house. Okay,
okay.
but that house owner will not allow me in. It's like that. Okay, so
Okay.
even though I have access, unless they allow me, I cannot get in.
Get it. Mm,
Okay, so exactly. See here, Zhang has no policy. Okay, Resource Z allows. So
Correct.
Zangvi has no identity policy. Okay, even though there is no explicit allow for me, there is no explicit deny. Okay, so Zangvi is allowed to access resource Z. In our case, we have created a demo user. Okay, so the demo user, I have not given any permission to that user except
Right.
for changing. Okay, but if I go to S3 bucket and assign a resource based policy that says allow demo user to read you, I can still do that. I don't need to assign the policy to Zanvi. Okay, either
Okay.
assign it, say the resource that hey allow him to do, or assign a policy to this user. Hey, you can access, unless specifically that resource denies you, you can access.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Got it.
Yeah. Any questions, guys, at this point?
Uh, Prem, so you said that identity based policy, say the fourth point is there is no policy, but in the resource based we have a policy to allow full access. If there also they mention there is no policy, right?
Yes.
So we don't have an access for that, right?
Yes. We don't have. Yeah.
Okay.
The resource says okay, specifically says allow this Zangvi to access this resource. Okay, and that is why you are able to access, even though you don't have any. If there is a specific deny, definitely you cannot do.
Okay.
Okay.
So the thing is, even though you have an access in identity policy, you have it, but the final decision is going to be if you have a resource-based policy or not. That is the consideration. Okay.
Yes. So this is how an allow policy will look like. So you have allow, and you have what action, and you will have a condition. You can say which resource, right? So it can be a resource, specific bucket name can be a resource, specific object name can be a resource. Within bucket there will be multiple objects. Specific object name can be a resource. Okay, allow this object with a condition. We can say only, if there is a name ends with this, there can be multiple conditions you can put. Okay, so that is an allow statement. A deny statement can be like this, and be, action, resource, what resource, what is the condition. Condition says not IP address. So anything that is not an IP address of this, it will be denied, which means that only these two IP addresses ranges will be allowed. It says not IP address. Condition is not IP address. So anything that is not in this list, it will be denied. That's what it's saying.
You said within a condition. So if you are not given any conditions, which simply will denied, right? What will it will be denied,
So
right?
there is no condition, simply deny. Everything will be denied. All
Everything
actions
will be
are denied.
okay.
So we have seen organizations. So an organization is at the, high level. You can have, these are all the accounts, multiple accounts. Project A is an account. Within that account, you can have this is a sub organization. So this is an organization. This is another, sub organization. Within that, you have accounts, right? And control policies, SCPs, we have told, right? So this organization allows specific set of controls for this higher level organization. Then that applies to all these. Okay. So for this specific SCP is there. For this, there is no SCP. So anything that is controlled within that account is managed. There is no control on top of it. Same thing with this. Anything applied on that higher one, the lower one automatically gets that. Okay, you can also add more to the lower organizations. Okay, but it's like a hierarchy. The top level, if whatever is allowed, then only that only comes to the next one. In that is, if there is some more restrictions are put, that also applies to the next levels. So there are few key features of your organization. Sorry. Manage accounts in separate environments, control and permissions. You can share resources within your organizations. or audit for compliance. So you may want to segregate the different accounts because you want to have developers access to something. You don't want developers to see something. So in that situations, you can have multiple accounts. And if you have multiple departments to manage the cost, to get your cost accounted in different things, you can have that. And there is no cost for using multiple accounts. There is no extra cost that says, okay, because you are having 20 organizations, 20 accounts in your organization, you will be charged extra. No, nothing like that. So those are some of the advantages of having an organization and accounts within that. Okay, so some of the best practices that we should be aware: lock away your AWS account root access key. Root access key nobody should have. You should not even have a root access key for your root user. You should only have a password thing. Any programmatic access, you should create a new user and provide that root user. Use roles to delegate permissions. As I said, instead of giving a user, creating a user, assigning permission, use directly role. Okay, for example, I will show you one lambda function. Okay, you will understand, I believe. Even if you don't understand the code, that's fine. I will just explain the concept here. I just created one S3 bucket, sorry, one lambda function that will list, the S3 bucket things. Okay. So what I'm doing here is it's just a function that will, get the access keys. So first I need to provide access to this lambda function, right? So here I have given access key and secret key that will be taken from the environment variables. So I can specify environment variable and say that. And after that, I will be doing that operation. So once I have this and I invoke the S3 with these keys, then it is going to assume that role and it's going to have that access, provided this access key has access to S3 bucket. Okay, instead of this I can do in a different way. I don't need to use this here, and I don't need to access the access key at all. What I can do is I can, you know in the configuration, there's something called a permission. Okay, there is a role. You can assign a role here. This role will have access to do something, right? So if you assign this role and provide access to that role to read S3, then you don't need to specify in the code to use a user. So this is a difference between using a user here and using a role here. So that is what is called as best practice. Best practice is not to use the user here, even though it is coming from environment variable, because anybody can go ahead and see this environment variable in the configuration. They can go here and see, okay, it is available. They can take this and use it in their program. So instead of that, if we just do it for the role, then it is fully secure. Okay, so that is the idea here. Where is it? Grant least privilege. As we said, do not provide all the access. Do only what is needed. Get started using permissions with AWS managed policies. As long as because AWS manages managed policies will be updated whenever AWS is updating. It is the best practice. Validate your policies often. There are tools to validate. Okay, you can take a policy and AWS provides validation tools to see what permission it has and what permission it does not have. Okay, use customer managed policies instead of inline. So if you don't go for an inline one, if it is specific, go for customer managed. Use access level to review IAM policies, IAM permissions. Okay, and configure a strong password. These are the common things. And enable MFA. definitely for a root user and for a normal user, you should enable MFA. Whoever can access to the console. User use roles for applications to run EC2 instances. Do not use access keys. Do not share the access keys. Rotate these credentials regularly if you are using. Remove unnecessary credentials. So don't create multiple API keys unnecessarily if you are not using them. Use policy conditions for extra security, because you can go at a very minute level, use those conditions, and monitor your activity using, there are tools like CloudTrail and all, where we can access the APIs activities. Okay, so that's all with respect to the concepts. Any questions?
Prem, I have a question. So, you said there is an AWS managed policy as well as a customer manager policy, right? So, you said we are going to be prefer the AWS managed policy since they automatically get updated if the update is came. See, from user perspective, if I'm assigning set of policies to some roles, and then that role will be assigned to the user. So, if there is going to be a managed AWS managed policy, it might be affected the role because it gets updated. If any update is happened, it automatically the AWS policy has been updated. That policy is assigned to some role. That role is assigned to some user. So the user will be affected because of this update in real
See,
time.
the update is specific to what the role is. See, the role itself says whether it is read only
Mm,
or full access, or there are multiple different things. Okay, so predominantly whether it is going to be read only or full access or power user kind of thing. Okay, so what, when we say AWS is going to update, right? If it is uh, write access, right?
mm.
So you should be able to do any write access. That is what it is. That is what the policy means. Any write access to that specific resource. Correct? Huh?
Right.
Tomorrow there is a new feature added to that service. Okay, to
Mm,
let's say the automatically this feature will be able to send the logs to this particular service.
mm.
Okay, so that's a new feature added to that thing, and you don't need to worry about adding that, watching out for that and adding this access for your user automatically, because you have entire write access. You will have write access to that as well.
Okay.
So that is what is managed, AWS managed.
Okay.
Okay. So any new feature enhanced, or they are deprecating some function, or
Mm,
they are deprecating some feature, automatically your user will lose that. Okay.
okay.
That is what it means.
Then everyone will go with that AWS managed policy, right? So, what is the purpose of customer
So
policy?
conditions. You don't want to make it a generic one. Okay. You want to be specific. You want to create a policy that is specific. I can create a policy that says this user can access this S3 bucket with starting with the name ABC only.
Okay.
That can be a customer manager policy. Okay, but I cannot do that with AWS managed policy.
Yes. Yeah. Got it. Thanks, Brett.
No problem. Okay, so if you have 5 more minutes, let's do a small check with ChatGPT. Okay, let's try a quiz with ChatGPT. So I am preparing for my cloud practitioner AWS exam. Quiz me in IAM concepts. I don't know other services yet. Okay. Ask me one by one and explain after my answer. Let's see what it is asking, and we will see. So this will ask you cloud practitioner level questions. Okay. The first question it's asking is, what is the primary function of AWS identity and access management? So to manage AWS resources in the cloud, to monitor AWS services and applications, to provide secure identity-based access to AWS services and resources to automate AWS deployment. What is the answer?
It could be option C, Prem.
C.
See, anybody else? Why not option A, to manage AWS resources in the cloud?
Yeah, I think it's an option A.
Okay,
So
who
it's
says A, C? Let's vote.
I'm saying C.
I'm saying A.
C.
C, 2C,
And
1A.
C.
C.
A.
Okay. A. Cool. Okay. To manage AWS resources is different than authorizing. IAM is mainly identity access management, right? Managing is different from providing access management. So I think C is more closer, to provide secure identity based access to services and resources. Let us see. Correct.
Correct.
Okay. Good job. Okay. So using IAM can, yes. Okay. Just asking the next question. Which IAM feature allows you to control access to AWS resources based on tags applied to users or AWS resources? Which IAM feature allows you to control access to AWS resources based on tags applied to
Policies.
users? Policies, groups, roles, access control lists. Okay, the answer is anybody?
Policies.
Policies A. Okay.
Policy.
Any other, anything anybody thinks otherwise? Not, we will
A.
put A.
That's a,
Okay, that is correct. So because through policies you can assign AWS, you can assign conditions, right? So that is what it is. IAM policies can be used to grant or deny things. These tags can be applied to IAM entities like users or roles. Tag-based access control in IAM policy enables you to create more granular access rules based on the tags assigned to the users or resources. Okay. For instance, you could create a policy that allows access only to resources tagged with a specific project code or department name. This makes it easier to ensure that individuals have access only to the resources they need. Okay. Yes. What is the difference between IAM role and IAM user? Very good question. An IAM role is a set of permissions that cannot be assigned to a user, while IAM user represents an individual or service that can interact with AWS. An IAM role can be assumed by anyone, while IAM user is unique identity with specific permissions. An IAM role is primarily used for resource operations, while IAM user is used for billing purposes. An IAM role is a way to grant specific permissions that can be assumed by AWS services or users without having to share
D.
access keys. An IAM user is identity with the permanent long-term credentials used to interact with AWS services. D.
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 Why not?
D.
Anaba?
Might be D.
D.
Ravi, you are saying B, yeah?
D. D.
D.
Last option.
Okay. Pandi is saying B. Okay.
Right.
B is also closer. I thought B when I read B. IAM
B.
role can be assumed. Well, okay, let's say B. Close but not right.
D.
D. Yeah, we got it.
Same, same.
What
So a
say?
user is an identity. A role, on the other hand, do not have any credentials. So yes, D is the right one. We'll do last one, and you guys can continue from your seats as much as you want. One more. Which of the following best describes the principle of least privilege? What is least privilege? Granting every user full access to all AWS services but auditing their actions. Granting users the minimum set of permissions required to perform their duties. Creating one IAM user with administrative permissions, sharing the credentials. Using IAM roles exclusively and avoiding the creation of IAM users. What is the least privilege here?
I think B.
B.
D.
D, yeah. Okay. So why do you think it is D? IAM
Minimum.
role, IAM role को, okay, IAM user it just talks about that. It doesn't talk about least privilege. Least privilege na minimum, yeah. You can create
Yeah.
an IAM role with maximum privilege also. Just because we are using role doesn't mean we are giving minimum privilege. Okay, so I think that B will be the answer. Let's see.
Hmm.
Granting users minimum set of permissions. Yeah. We can also ask, let's say, why not D? Please, it's about minimizing the access right to the bare minimum. Might seem like a strategy to limit, it doesn't fully capture the essence of principle of least privilege. Okay. So you get a detailed answer. You can read that. Okay, cool. I think yes, we now have a good understanding. So please try from your side. This will definitely help you get these. These insights will definitely help you. Fine tune your understanding. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Yeah.